Here we are today with Michael Parenti, also known as Exiledsurfer, and we're gonna just shoot the shit, talk everything from crypto to philosophy to life.
Great. Sounds good.
Because that's how usually our conversations are anyways, with lots of tangents. So be prepared for that.
So what's the first tangent?
Let's start with crypto. Let's start with the thing that we're both passionate about.
So Bitcoin, not blockchain crypto, or cryptographic money, or cryptography, or what? Because that's like, it seems that, everybody approaches it from a different sort of thing when they say that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what does it even mean at this point? What is crypto? There's so many facets to it, and so many actual technical parts and artifacts that you could just hone in on and talk about, for hours. So that's a good question. Where do we start?
Yeah. So I guess we really start at the basics, right? So crypto is short for cryptography, which is the process of making data or communications opaque, right? And the cypherpunks used cryptography to, first of all, do secure messaging,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we got this idea of cryptographic money, right? Which there's crypto under the hood, math under the hood, right? And then at some point, everybody started calling that crypto.
Yeah. And all the cryptographers got pissed.
Right? Yeah. So, but I think that the big distinction in how it is that we're using it now is, people confuse a blockchain with being crypto, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the argument about whether Bitcoin is the only crypto and whether other monies or value systems which use cryptography under the hood are crypto. And so I tended to not have the maximalist viewpoint, right?
Yeah. So
I think that crypto is something that secures our ability to communicate with each other, our ability to and our right to transact with each other. And some of it has applications in messaging protocols, Signal being the good example, and all the others that are out there. And then it has the aspect of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I find the debate to be quite silly because it's between people that are literally ignorant. Right? So it seems that most of the conversations that happen now on, we'll just stick with crypto Twitter, right? Because
Oh,
I think
gosh.
I think it's fair to use that as an example across portals. We've essentially created tribes around back office software, I think.
Bingo.
It's a really incredible, it's an incredibly strange phenomenon, right? To have warring tribes, yeah, that are essentially arguing about an Excel sheet, right? Or a GitHub repo, yeah? With the full force of their identity and their personality and whatever belief system it is that they bring to it, right? So the crypto anarchists come from one perspective, and then the libertarians come from another perspective, and then we have all of the capitalists that are on top of it, and then we have the socialist viewpoint, right? So if we look at UBI, right? So I think that what happens is that everybody comes into and discovers cryptographic money, and then expresses their personality as it already is.
Yeah.
And maybe they have some sort of epiphany, and then it becomes incredibly religious, right? Because a light goes on in their head, and there's so many different little individual lights. It's a whole spectrum actually of light, and then everything gets muddied up because people don't have either a formal education, right, or a research-based approach to it, and there's all of this immediate data and influencers and people that are charismatic and that you maybe appreciate for something else that are all sort of in the debate, and it feels from a cypherpunk or a crypto-anarchist perspective, it feels like we've lost our way because there's so many voices out in the out there in the public sphere, and that's led to, I think, a crisis of conscience in a lot of places, and it's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon to watch, but still, it's very strange for me that we have warring tribes over over back office software, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it's a really interesting concept to think about it in that regard. And I've always said, like, I've studied blockchain communities for over, whatever it is, 6 years now. And I just see that, to me, like, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, it's just a mirror for humanity, basically. It represents everything that we are, and it reflects it back to us, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all together. It's messy because humans are messy, and it's literally just reflecting that. And everybody brings their own worldview, their own trauma, their own sort of
dreams, aspirations, hopes.
Aspirations. Yes, there's also the optimistic side of it, which is a huge part of it, right? And they all inscribe that into their vision, and because it is a technology that is very malleable, that, you know, allows for a lot of possibilities. So to me, it was always human. It is very human, you know, and I think we really have to start thinking more about it in those terms rather than just like technical ones. And I've been fighting for that as a social scientist in this space for a very long time now. And you know what? I think people are finally starting to realize it. So yeah.
So I think that the first place where that became sort of apparent was, well, there were two places in the Bitcoin world, right? We had the blockchain, the block size wars, right? Where people were arguing that Bitcoin needs to be a method of exchange, not just to store value, and therefore the technical direction should go in this way, and the capitalists, or, you know, wanted to replace payment providers, right? And so they met up behind closed doors, right? And that tasted really bad for the Bitcoin community, which is free open source software, right? And so all these businesses just wanted to meet with each other and come to some sort of idea of a standard, right, that they could push and lobby for with governments. And then Bitcoin forked. We had Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core, and then BSV came along, right? And so there was all of these socio-technical things that happened, but that was sort of tolerable in its way. But then came Ethereum, and then came the DAO hack, and so Ethereum had, as one of its early narratives, it had code is law, right? Yeah. So cypherpunks write code, code is law, which means that, you know, what it is deployed on the network is the final say, and anything that you want to argue about it, yeah, the smart contract that's running is the final arbiter. That didn't work out so well because somebody either exploited the code or used it as it was programmed to do, right? And that ended up the Ethereum network splitting. But this idea of code being law points to a basic, super nerdy, super autistic, super maybe even sociopathic view of human nature, and that is that very early on, engineers were trying to architect and design the messiness of humanity out of the system, right? We're going to deploy code, and that's it, so that we don't have to have arbiters and judges and courts and whatever. And that really, really went south because we had differing points of view about which then was the legitimate chain on Ethereum, right? And I pretty early on was like very skeptical of why it is that we're trying to engineer humans out of the equation, right?
Right.
So if we're gonna have governance, and we're gonna build consensus rule sets, that's not going to stop just from the point of designing and agreeing upon which rule set we set into motion, right? And we didn't really have the possibility for arbitration, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Aragon come along and say, okay, we're going to build a legal system, a jurisdictional, so an internet jurisdiction where these things can be settled.
Mm-hmm.
That whole DAO structure blew up in the way it is that teams were getting funded and whatever. Then we had Claros come along, right? And Claros says, okay, here's the way it is that we arbitrate blockchain disputes. And I think that these things are interesting and good, but none of them ever gained any real sort of momentum or network effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I think, is because we're replicating and building from scratch over and over and over again, right? So if I look at it from my perspective as being over 60, right, and all the people in the space being 35 or under, it's almost like everybody's relearning lessons that have come in earlier stages of computer science or in social science, right? And so I think that the experimentation is good. I think that people's hearts and minds are in the right place.
Yep.
At the core of the engineering of all this stuff. And really we can just put aside all of the people that are going to scam no matter what the system is and are going to attach on and grift and whatever. So we've had experiments where we've tried to create governance structures and arbitration structures and legal structures, but they failed.
Mm.
They failed just absolutely.
Yeah, because we're building from scratch, as you said. And I right now we have the whole network state movement going on, right? And there's a lot of talk between sort of like building from scratch or actually integrating existing infrastructure. And building from scratch is also expensive, right? It costs time and you lose a lot of resources and energy. And I'm kind of moving back between network states and DAOs, but like one of the problems we see with DAOs right now is that it's becoming very costly for everyone, to participate, costly in time, costly in money. And it's ironic because the original argument behind blockchain and all these decentralized infrastructure was efficiency, right? So I just find it so paradoxical that we're going completely a different direction right now.
So I think that the concept of the DAO was very, very early paper from Vitalik, right?
Mm-hmm.
Digital Autonomous Corporations. So first we were talking about DACs and DAOs, right? And then it became DAO really quickly because they launched the DAO for funding. Totally noble pursuit, right? And then just think about the word, digital autonomous organization. What does autonomous mean? Autonomous means no human intervention. It runs in and of and by itself.
Right.
Very, very old cypherpunk concept.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the Bridge trilogy and Mona Lisa Overdrive and those things, in the final parts of the trilogy, there is autonomous AIs in the foam cloud off Earth that are managing assets, right, and interacting with the broader course of humanity. We've had this idea of something being autonomous, but DAOs were never autonomous.
Right.
And I think that where it is that DAOs went wrong is that they started in a time of regulatory uncertainty, and so it was how do we create this organization or a company that's outside of existing legal jurisdictions.
But it was also based on agorism, right?
Yeah, so it had its philosophical philosophical underpinnings, but the reality is they were just a legal arbitrage.
Mhm.
How do we have an organization that has a treasury that can distribute digital currencies outside of legal jurisdictions that had essentially no laws to govern them?
Right.
And the reality, I think, the real painful reality, philosophically for me, yeah, is the lie that we tell ourselves when we say that, we want decentralized systems. The reality is that people essentially do not want to pay taxes. Yeah?
Just like privacy arguments.
Exactly, right? So this is not going to win me. This is not going to win me any friends or adherents in any of the privacy communities that I'm active in, or in any of the cryptocurrency communities that I'm active in. But I think that really, if you're intellectually honest, a vast majority of our sort of public narratives about these things have to do with the fact that people essentially do not want to give the government their money. And I think that that's valid, right? I think that's valid, but not saying it, or not admitting it in all the arguments that we see, right? On why it is that, we do what it is that we do. Very early on, one of the T-shirts was "Tax me if you can." You don't see that anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody's sort of like living this lie that we're building these systems to protect our privacy. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it means the government can't prove that I have assets, right? And yet we have these public ledgers which are completely transparent. We have chain analysis, and we have people gathered on electronic communication platforms spewing their identity, right? Yeah, around, their whole identity is built around which chain they're associated with and why. Mm-hmm. And they're doing that on completely compromised platforms. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Twitter, X, all data sucked up, right? Discord, Telegram, right? Everywhere, Reddit, everywhere anybody is communicating about these things and thinking that just because my public address,
right,
yeah, is not out there, right? All of those social graphs have been mapped from day one, mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
All of our social graphs across all these social media platforms, where they're now delivering algorithmic content to us. Any government actor, yeah, any state actor, any corporate actor can unmask pretty much anybody, right? All of the metadata that we've been fighting against, it's people think it's a free speech act. Okay, I'm for Palestine, I'm not for Palestine. It's not about all of that, it's about all of the metadata about who's communicating with who and that social graph. And those social graphs are, with a minimal amount of supercomputing power, all of your patterns of behavior on how it is that you interact with crypto. You're buying, you're selling, you're talking about this, you know what I mean? I'm traveling to El Salvador and I'm doing this, I'm traveling here, I'm doing, man, we are so compromised, right? In the middle of all of this stuff. They know who all the engineers are, right? They know who Amir Taki is. They know who Lefteris is. They know who, right?
Yep.
And they know who I am, right? They know who we all are. And so there's this, I think, pretty naive observation or belief, right? That somehow we're secure from government intervention if a government wants to go after you, right? A state actor or a corporate actor can uncover pretty much anybody at any point in time. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in the space, I think. Yeah, it doesn't take away from the the validity of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But socially, it's pretty hard to take essentially a social concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is cryptographic money, opt-in, permissionless,
Right.
consensus rule sets, yeah, that are nothing more than a social phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
right? That rely on social signaling.
Mm-hmm.
I use this, you should use it for this reason.
Yep.
Good reason, bad reason. NFTs, whatever. Giveth, contribution campaign, circular economy,
Right.
circles UBI, right? Any of the concepts. The whole thing is at its core a social consensus
Yeah.
valuation of a digital token, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you balance that with the ideas of privacy, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's an inherent conflict across the whole space.
I mean, to
Yeah.
me, it's already too late. A little too late, people. I feel like we already created a monster that we cannot control at this point, and we don't even have the bandwidth to control because we have all these channels which are compromised going all, we're using them simultaneously. You got Telegram, Twitter, Slack, whatever, like going all off at the same time with all these notifications, and we don't even have the bandwidth to attend to them because our attention span just is split between all of these channels. We're always running around. Some of us, ride 2-3 bikes doing multiple projects, like, so I don't really have that much hope for us.
Yeah. So I don't know about whether that's the right perspective to sort of take. So history doesn't exist in a vacuum, and history is being made as we, as we live, and we're living through a time that's a paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In many different ways. Yeah. So socially, technologically, economically, climate, all of these things are sort of intersecting, and we do have, despite all of the surveillance, we still have a huge amount of freedom to collaborate with each other and to do these things, right? And because of open source software development processes, yeah, all this stuff is perpetuated and has actually shifted the debate. So governments, institutions, financial things, everybody's adapting to what it is that we've collectively.
It's reform. It's not revolution. It's
collectively
reform.
That we've collectively put in motion. Yeah. And reform at the moment just seems to be faster payment rails, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need a blockchain for a social app.
Right.
And so I don't think that there's ever going to be a blockchain-based social application with 1 billion users.
And why is that?
Well, why should every in-game purchase that I make be recorded on chain? Why should the flotsam and jetsam of all of our social interactions, right, that take place on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and 400 other platforms that we don't use in Europe, but that are spread out across the world, why should that data exist on a blockchain for any period of time longer, So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you look back over the course of artifacts from human history, what remains in the sediment of the earth, what gets uncovered, by archaeology and things like that, the most important stuff about the course of human civilization sort of might need to be uncovered, but it's still there to be researched and brought forward. We don't have the daily lives and the daily thoughts of every individual in the record, right? And it's incredibly vain and self-centered to think that every single one of us should have a record of our existence that is embedded on a blockchain of our in-game purchase, right, of this one gaming universe, right, and that needs to be secured by proof of work or proof of stake and perpetuated forward into, you know, into the indefinite future, right?
Yeah.
And that gets the idea, that gets really to the philosophy of life, you know,
Right.
it's an existential question, right?
Permanence. It was
Yeah,
always
permanence.
about time. It was always about time.
Right? And I think it's very difficult for human beings to come to terms with the fact that if not the vast majority of us, but all of us are essentially as individuals irrelevant. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's an existential question, like how important am I
Absolutely.
to the course of civilization, right? Very few of us, very few of the reflections of the mirror are, and you know, capable of creating something unique and building a community around it and a philosophy and a manifestation of it that makes it, you know, for a time and a place, you know, a mass movement. But those things come in what we would consider cultural shifts, right, that happened over decades or over centuries. They happen literally in the matter of months now. Yeah? And so how much of that data, right, how much of our electronic footprint, right, needs to be perpetuated for civilization to move forward? And I tend to believe that that's a very, very, very minimal amount. And so blockchains, right, which are designed to make, you know, history permanent, yeah, is really only necessary in very, very, very few cases, yeah. And yet, all of us that are online have this arrogance to believe that everything that we say and everything that it is that we do should be a part of the permanent record. And I think the data needs to be ephemeral, not only for the reasons of how do you forgive people for their sins, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we forgive people for their transgressions,
Mm-hmm.
for their mistakes, for learning over the course of life? You're a teenager now, right?
Yeah.
And you're putting your data out, right? Totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be present in the world.
Yep.
Like, if that data is permanent, right? Where do you even begin with forgiveness for people's transgressions? And yet we live in a time where governments and surveillance capitalism is making those transgressions ever more narrowly defined and ever more micromanaged,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty fucking dystopian, right?
Right.
And so I've been concerned for quite some time about what is it that we put on the blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
and why, right? What do we bury with proof of work? What do we bury with proof of stake, right? On these data perpetuation things, yeah. So it feels like we've sort of gone off track, yeah. And then with all the venture capital sloshing around the world, all of the misallocated capital that's been extracted from us, that people can't pay their rent, can't pay for their energy costs, don't have clean water, right? You know, it's the infrastructure is just declined in the West, right?
Mm-hmm.
To unbelievable levels, because we've extracted all of the money out of the financial services, right? Which were originally, taxes were to be to provide infrastructure, public transportation, water, heating, electricity, right? Broadband internet. We've been made to pay for that stuff over and over and over and over again, and we're being made to pay for it more and more and more because we've financialized everything. That's the only standard now that we seem to have.